Sometimes the kindest thing anyone can do is open their door when the whole world has shut theirs. It's a simple act that can change two lives forever. In the winter of 1876, a young woman arrives in Timber Ridge with nowhere else to go. The town turns her away. As darkness falls and the cold sets in, she faces a night alone that she might not survive. Then a mountain man who keeps to himself steps forward. He offers her his cabin for the night. One act of kindness becomes something more. Two people who've been hurt by life find something unexpected in each other. What drove her to this frozen town, and why does he live alone in the mountains? Before we continue, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. The stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of the Mercantile, its wheels crunching against the frozen mud of Timber Ridge's main street. Sarah Brennan stepped down carefully, her worn boots finding purchase on the icy ground. She carried a single carpet bag, its leather cracked and faded from years of use. Everything she owned in this world fit inside that bag, and even that felt like too much weight to bear. The cold hit her immediately. It was a different cold than St. Louis, sharper, meaner, the kind that found its way through every layer of clothing and settled into your bones. She pulled her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders, knowing it would do little good. The coat she'd pawned 3 weeks ago would have been useful now, but there had been no choice. She'd needed the money for the stage fare. Timber Ridge was smaller than she'd imagined. A single dirt road lined with wooden buildings, most of them looking like they'd been thrown up in a hurry and never properly finished. The Mercantile, a saloon with a crooked sign, a blacksmith's forge silent in the late afternoon, and what appeared to be a boarding house with a hand-painted shingle that read, Mrs. Hadley's Rooms. There was no train station, no telegraph office, no bank. Just a collection of structures huddled together against the wilderness as if seeking comfort in numbers. Sarah had studied the town from inside the stage during the last mile of approach. She'd memorized the layout, planned her first steps. The boarding house would be her first stop, then the Mercantile to inquire about work. She had $17.30 remaining, enough for perhaps 2 weeks of room and board if Mrs. Hadley's rates were reasonable. By then, she would need employment. She could sew, she could cook, she could keep accounts. Surely a frontier town needed someone with those skills. But as she stood on that frozen street, carpetbag in hand, she felt the eyes on her. They watched from the Mercantile window, from the saloon doorway, from the shadowed spaces between buildings. Not curious eyes, suspicious ones, hostile ones. A woman in a severe gray dress emerged from the boarding house. She was perhaps 50, with iron-gray hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her features. Her mouth was a thin line of disapproval. "Mrs. Hadley?" Sarah asked, stepping forward with what she hoped was a respectful smile. "I am." The woman's voice was as cold as the air. "I'm looking for a room, just temporary, until I can find more permanent arrangements. I can pay in advance." "No rooms available." Mrs. Hadley's response was immediate. Final. Sarah blinked. "But your sign says, 'No rooms for you.'" The woman's eyes traveled over Sarah's appearance, taking in the worn dress, the thin shawl, the desperate look that Sarah knew she couldn't quite hide. "We don't accommodate strangers in Timber Ridge. Especially not your kind." "My kind." Sarah's voice came out smaller than she intended. "Women traveling alone, running from something most likely. We've got enough troubles without importing more." Mrs. Hadley turned to go back inside. "Please." The word escaped before Sarah could stop it. "I'm not running from anything. I'm a widow. I'm respectable. I just need—" "No." The door closed with a definitive thud. Sarah stood there for a moment, the cold seeping deeper. She turned toward the Mercantile, but the face in the window disappeared before she could approach. The saloon was not an option. A woman alone would find no help there, only trouble. She walked the length of the street, trying 2 other establishments, receiving the same response: closed doors, turned backs. Silence. By the time the sun began its descent behind the mountains, Sarah understood. Timber Ridge had decided she was unwelcome, and nothing she said or did would change that. The stage had already departed, the driver not bothering to check if his passenger had found accommodation. The next stage wouldn't come through for 3 days. She found herself back in the center of town, standing near the water trough that had frozen solid. The temperature was dropping fast. She could see her breath, watch it dissipate into the darkening air. Her fingers were numb inside her thin gloves. She had no plan for this scenario. In all her careful planning, she had never imagined an entire town simply refusing to acknowledge her existence. The thought crossed her mind that she might die here, freeze to death on this street while people watched from behind their curtains. She'd heard stories of such things. People found frozen in the spring thaw. They'd bury her in an unmarked grave, and no one would ever know what became of Sarah Brennan. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the small daguerreotype she kept there. Her mother's face looked back at her, serious and dignified in the formal pose the photographer had required. Taken 20 years ago, when Sarah was just a child. Her mother had died the following winter, consumption taking her slowly and painfully. The photograph was one of the few things Sarah's father hadn't sold or gambled away before his own death. "I'm sorry, Mama," she whispered. "I tried to make it to the homestead. I tried to find the place you told me about. I'm sorry I failed." "You talking to ghosts, miss?" The voice startled her. She turned to find a man standing a few feet away, so still and quiet she hadn't heard his approach. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell past his collar and a beard that was more functional than fashionable. He wore buckskin and fur, layers of clothing that spoke of someone who knew how to survive in this climate. His eyes were gray, weathered at the corners, and they studied her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I'm sorry," she said, tucking the daguerreotype away. "I didn't mean to disturb anyone." "You didn't disturb me." He glanced around the empty street. "Seems like you're the one been disturbed. Town turn you away?" Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. The man was quiet for a long moment. He looked toward the mountains, then back at her. "You got anywhere to go?" "No." Another silence. Sarah could hear the wind picking up, whistling through the gaps between buildings. She could feel the darkness settling in, heavy and absolute. "I got a cabin up the mountain," the man said finally. "About an hour's ride. It's not much, but it's warm and it's dry. You can stay there tonight, just tonight," he added quickly, as if worried she might misunderstand. "I'll bring you back to town in the morning, or take you to the next settlement if you prefer." Sarah looked at him. She knew she should be afraid. A strange man, offering to take her to an isolated cabin in the mountains. Every warning her mother had ever given her said to refuse. But those warnings assumed she had alternatives, assumed there were other doors to knock on, other choices to make. "Why would you help me?" she asked. The man's expression shifted, something painful crossing his features before he controlled it. "Because someone should have," he said simply. Sarah made her decision. "All right," he nodded once. "My horse is at the livery. You wait here. I'll bring him around." He disappeared into the shadows between buildings, moving with a quiet grace that seemed at odds with his size. Sarah stood alone again, but this time with something she hadn't felt in months, a small spark of hope. When he returned, leading a large roan horse, he helped her up into the saddle with a gentleness that surprised her, then swung up behind her. She felt his arms come around her as he took the reins and realized she didn't even know his name. "I'm Sarah," she said. "Sarah Brennan." "Elijah Thorne," he replied. "Most folks call me Eli." They rode out of Timber Ridge as full darkness fell, heading up into the mountains where the snow lay deep and the pines stood like silent witnesses. Sarah didn't look back at the town. There was nothing there for her now. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that Eli Thorne was riding into his own past as much as she was, riding toward an uncertain future, and that the simple act of offering shelter would change both their lives in ways neither could imagine. The cabin appeared through the trees like something from a dream. Sarah had expected a rough shelter, perhaps little more than 4 walls and a roof. Instead, she found a solid structure built with care and skill. The logs were chinked properly against the wind, the roof was tight, and smoke rose from a stone chimney. A small porch ran along the front, and even in the darkness she could see the neat stack of firewood under the eave. Eli dismounted first, then helped her down. Her legs were unsteady after the cold ride, and she stumbled slightly. His hand steadied her elbow. "Careful," he said. "Ground's icy." He led the horse to a small lean-to stable beside the cabin, tending to the animal with efficient movements while Sarah waited on the porch. She stamped her feet, trying to restore feeling to her toes. The temperature had dropped further during the ride, and she could see her breath forming thick clouds in the air. When Eli opened the cabin door, warmth flooded out. He'd left a fire banked in the hearth before riding into town, and it had kept the single room comfortably heated. Sarah stepped inside and stopped, surprised again by what she found. This was not the rough bachelor quarters she'd anticipated. The cabin was small but thoughtfully arranged. A bed stood in one corner, made up with what looked like a patchwork quilt. A table and 2 chairs occupied the center of the room, and shelves lined one wall, holding not just supplies, but books, at least 24 of them. A rocking chair sat near the hearth, and cooking implements hung from hooks with military precision. Everything was clean, organized, cared for. But it was what sat in the far corner that made Sarah's breath catch. A cradle, small, beautifully carved, made from light pine wood. Even from across the room she could see the care that had gone into its construction. The rockers were smooth and even, the sides decorated with simple but elegant designs. Leaves and flowers, carved with a steady hand. It was covered with a cloth, as if someone had put it away carefully but couldn't quite bring themselves to remove it from sight entirely. Eli closed the door behind them, shutting out the cold. He moved to the hearth and began building up the fire. "There's water in the pitcher," he said, not looking at her. "Basin's on the shelf. I'll heat some for washing if you'd like." Sarah couldn't stop looking at the cradle. She knew she should say something, thank him for his hospitality, but the words stuck in her throat. That cradle spoke of things too painful to acknowledge, hopes and plans and a future that had never come to pass. "You can take the bed," Eli continued, still focused on the fire. "I'll sleep in the chair. Won't be the first time. Mr. Thorne?" "Eli." "Eli." She turned to face him. "I don't want to intrude on your privacy. The cradle. You had a family." His hands stilled on the poker he'd been using to adjust the logs. For a long moment he didn't move, didn't speak. When he finally stood and turned toward her, his face was carefully blank. "Had," he said. Past tense. 8 years past. "I'm sorry." "No need to be sorry. You didn't know." He moved to the shelves, pulling down tin plates and cups. "You hungry? I've got beans and cornbread. Not fancy, but it's filling." Sarah recognized the deflection. She'd used the same technique herself often enough. "I'm hungry," she said quietly. "Thank you." They worked in silence, Eli heating the beans over the fire while Sarah set the table. It felt strange, this domestic routine with a man she'd known for less than 2 hours. But there was something comfortable about it too, as if they'd both played these roles before and remembered the steps. The meal was simple but good. Sarah hadn't realized how hungry she was until she started eating. She'd had nothing since a dry biscuit that morning, and before that her meals had been sparse. Money had been tight for weeks. "How long since you ate proper?" Eli asked, watching her. "A while," she admitted. He pushed the cornbread toward her. Eat what you want. I've got plenty." After they'd finished and cleared the dishes, an awkward silence settled over the cabin. Sarah was exhausted but too aware of the strangeness of her situation to relax. Eli seemed equally uncomfortable, standing by the hearth with his hands in his pockets, clearly unaccustomed to having another person in his space. "I should tell you," Sarah said, "why I came to Timber Ridge. You deserve to know, given that you've shown me such kindness." Eli shook his head. "You don't owe me explanations, but I want to give them." She took a breath. "I'm a widow. My husband died 6 months ago in St. Louis. We had nothing. He'd gambled away what little money we had, and when he died, there were debts. Creditors took everything. I had nowhere to go, no family left, but I remembered something my mother told me before she died, about a homestead her father had claimed out here. She said if I ever needed a place, if I ever needed to start over, I should come west and find it." "So you came looking for the homestead?" "Yes. I have a map. Rough, drawn from memory, but it's something. The land is supposed to be northeast of Timber Ridge, maybe 40 miles. I thought if I could find it, I could claim it somehow, make a life there." She laughed bitterly. "It sounds foolish now, saying it out loud." "It's not foolish," Eli said. "It's brave. It's desperate. Sometimes they're the same thing." He moved to the shelves and pulled down a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. He poured a small measure into each and handed one to Sarah. "To new starts," he said. She took the glass, surprised. "You believe in those?" "I want to." He drank, then set his glass down. "My turn for honesty. I came up here 80 years ago to get away from people. From everything. My wife, her name was Catherine, she died in childbirth. The baby died too. A girl. We'd already picked out the name Emma." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "Eli, I'm so sorry. I was a school teacher in Denver. Had a good life, or so I thought. When Catherine died, something in me broke. I couldn't stay there anymore. Couldn't walk the streets where we'd walked together. Couldn't live in the house where she died. So I came up here. Built this cabin. Stayed away from people. It was easier that way." "Why did you come into town today?" He was quiet for a moment. "Supplies. I go in every few weeks. Get what I need. Leave. Usually nobody talks to me and I don't talk to them. But today I saw you standing there, and I saw how they were treating you and—" He stopped, searching for words. "I just couldn't ride away. Couldn't leave you there to freeze." "Because of Catherine?" "Because it was the right thing to do." He met her eyes. "And maybe because I'm tired of being alone up here with ghosts." Thunder rumbled in the distance. They both looked toward the door, though they couldn't see outside. The wind had picked up, rattling the shutters. "Storm's coming," Eli said. "Big one, by the sound of it." "Will it be bad?" "Could be. These mountain storms can last days." He moved to the window and opened the shutter a crack, peering out. Snow was already falling, thick and fast. He closed the shutter and turned back to her. "Might be more than one night if this keeps up." "That going to be a problem?" Sarah thought about Timber Ridge, about the closed doors and cold faces. "No," she said. "No problem at all." But even as she said it, she felt the weight of the situation. Trapped in a remote cabin with a stranger, cut off from civilization by a storm. Every propriety she'd been taught said this was wrong, dangerous, foolish. Yet sitting there in the warm cabin, watching Eli bank the fire for the night, she felt safer than she had in months. The storm hit in earnest around midnight. Sarah lay in the bed. Eli had insisted, refusing her protests, listening to the wind howl around the cabin. She could hear him in the rocking chair, the slight creak of wood as he shifted position. Neither of them slept much that first night. By morning, the world outside was buried in snow. 3 feet had fallen, and it was still coming down. Eli opened the door just wide enough to gauge the situation, then closed it quickly against the cold. "We're snowed in," he said. "Could be a week before it's safe to travel." Sarah sat up in bed, wrapped in the quilt. A week? Maybe more. These storms don't play by rules. He moved to stoke the fire. I've got supplies to last. We'll be fine. But Sarah could see the tension in his shoulders, hear it in his voice. A week trapped together. Two strangers with painful pasts and uncertain futures. What had seemed like simple kindness the night before suddenly felt like something much more complicated. Outside, the snow continued to fall, burying the world in white silence. Inside, two people who'd thought themselves beyond hope or healing began the slow, difficult process of learning to trust again. The snow began to melt on the 10th day, not rapidly, but enough to suggest that winter might eventually release its grip. Sarah woke to the sound of water dripping from the eaves, a rhythm like a heartbeat. Spring was still weeks away, but the promise of it hung in the air. She found Eli at the table, studying a piece of paper with intense focus. As she approached, she recognized it, the map her mother had drawn, the one showing the way to the family homestead. "I found it in your bag," Eli said without looking up. "Needed to mend the leather and it fell out. I wasn't prying." "I know." She sat across from him, pulling her shawl tighter. "What do you think?" "I think it's rough. No scale, no landmarks I recognize. But the general direction is right. Northeast, into the disputed territories." He traced a line with his finger. "This area here, if I'm reading it right, that's near the old trading post route. Haven't been that way in years, but I remember it being rough country." "Disputed territories," Sarah repeated. "What does that mean?" Eli leaned back, his expression serious. "Means the government claims it, but so do the Lakota, and nobody's quite settled who has the right. Means there are people there who don't care much for law or boundaries. Prospectors, trappers, men running from something. It's not safe country for a woman alone. I won't be alone forever. Once I reach the homestead, I can what?" Eli's voice was sharp. "Build a cabin by yourself, clear land, defend yourself against whoever might decide to take what you've claimed." He shook his head. "Sarah, I admire what you're trying to do, but you need to understand what you're walking into." Sarah felt anger flare. "So what would you have me do? Go back to St. Louis? There's nothing for me there. No home, no family, no prospects. At least here I have a chance. A chance to get killed. A chance to build something that's mine." She stood, pacing to the window. The snow glittered in the morning sun, beautiful and treacherous. "You don't understand. You're a man. You can choose to live alone in the mountains, and people think you're independent, strong. When a woman does it, she's just desperate or crazy. I don't think you're desperate or crazy." She turned to face him. "Then what do you think?" Eli was quiet for a long moment. "I think you're brave. I think you're determined. And I think that might not be enough out there." The truth in his words stung because Sarah had thought the same thing herself, late at night when doubt crept in. But hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way she wasn't ready to face. "The weather's clearing," she said, changing the subject. "I should start thinking about moving on soon. It'll be another week at least before the trails are passable. Maybe 2. Eli stood and went to the hearth, stirring the coals. No point in planning until then. But they both knew that wasn't true. Every day that passed was another day of familiarity, another day of comfort, another day of something growing between them that neither wanted to acknowledge. That afternoon, Eli suggested they go hunting. "Meat's getting low," he said, "and you should learn how to track and shoot properly if you're set on going to that homestead." They bundled into warm clothes and headed into the forest. Eli moved through the snow with practiced ease, teaching Sarah to read the signs. Tracks, broken branches, disturbed snow. He showed her how to move quietly, how to breathe, how to wait. They found a small group of deer near a stand of aspens. Eli positioned Sarah, helped her steady the rifle, showed her where to aim. "It's not about killing," he said quietly. "It's about respect. Taking only what you need. Making it quick and clean. You understand?" Sarah nodded. She'd never fired a gun before coming to the cabin. Eli had been teaching her to shoot at targets, but this was different. This was life and death, sustenance and survival. She pulled the trigger. The deer fell, clean, quick, just as Eli had taught her. Afterward, as they prepared the kill, Eli said, "You did well. Not many people can make that shot the first time. I had a good teacher." They worked together, falling into a rhythm that felt natural. Sarah's hands were steady as she helped with the butchering, following Eli's instructions. She'd helped prepare chickens back in St. Louis, but this was different, harder, more visceral, more honest somehow. "My father used to say that anyone who eats meat should know how to prepare it," Sarah said. "Should understand what goes into putting food on the table. Thomas thought that was barbaric. He wanted a wife who kept her hands clean." "What did you want?" Sarah considered the question. "I wanted to be useful, to matter. In St. Louis, I was just Thomas's wife, just another woman keeping house and pretending not to notice when he disappeared for days. Here," she gestured around them at the forest, the mountains, the vast sky. "Here I feel like I could actually be someone." "You are someone," Eli said. "You were someone in St. Louis, too. Place doesn't make the person." "Maybe not, but it can give you room to grow into who you're meant to be." They carried the meat back to the cabin as the sun began to set, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. Sarah felt tired but satisfied, as if she'd accomplished something real. That evening, they prepared dinner together. Fresh venison steaks, fried potatoes, the last of the wild onions Eli had stored. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that comes when words aren't necessary. After dinner, Eli pulled out a harmonica and played a few simple tunes. The music was sweet and melancholy, filling the cabin with a kind of gentle longing. Sarah found herself swaying to the rhythm, remembering dances from her youth. "Dance with me," she said impulsively. Eli stopped playing. "What?" "Dance with me. Just for a moment. When was the last time you danced?" "Catherine's funeral. People danced after. Celebration of life, they called it." His expression was distant. "I couldn't. Just stood there watching." "Then it's been too long." Sarah stood and held out her hand. "Please." For a moment she thought he'd refuse. Then, slowly, he set down the harmonica and stood. He took her hand, his other hand settling at her waist. They moved slowly across the cabin floor, no music except the crackle of the fire and the sound of their own breathing. It was the closest they'd been since that night when she'd had the nightmare. Sarah could feel the warmth of him, the solid presence. She could smell wood smoke and pine and something uniquely Eli. His hand at her waist was gentle but firm, guiding her through turns. "I'd forgotten," Eli said quietly, "what this felt like." "What?" "Being close to someone. Not being alone." Sarah looked up at him. In the firelight, his eyes were soft, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. "You're not alone," she said. "Not anymore. Neither are you." They stopped moving, though neither let go. The moment stretched between them, full of possibility and fear and something that felt dangerously like hope. Then Eli stepped back, breaking the contact. "It's late. You should rest." Sarah nodded, recognizing the retreat for what it was. "Good night, Eli." "Good night, Sarah." But as she lay in bed that night, she could still feel the warmth of his hand, the strength of his presence, and she knew, with absolute certainty, that leaving this cabin was going to be harder than she'd ever imagined. Spring arrived slowly, in increments. Each day brought a little more melt, a little more bird song, a little more green pushing through the retreating snow. and with it came the unspoken knowledge that Sarah's time at the cabin was drawing to a close. Eli had taken to disappearing for hours, checking trap lines he claimed needed attention, scouting trails he said might be passable soon. Sarah knew he was avoiding the inevitable conversation, and she let him. She wasn't ready for it either. On a particularly warm afternoon, when the sun felt almost friendly and the air smelled of mud and growing things, Eli returned to the cabin carrying something wrapped in oilcloth. He set it on the table with unusual care. "I've been saving this," he said. "Didn't seem right to open it alone." Sarah came to the table, curious. Eli unwrapped the cloth to reveal a small tin with faded lettering. "Fine Ceylon tea." "I bought it in Denver," Eli explained, "the year before Catherine died. She loved tea, but we could rarely afford the good stuff. I was saving it for a special occasion. After she died, I couldn't bring myself to open it. Seemed wrong, drinking it without her." "Eli, but I realized something," he continued. "She wouldn't have wanted it to go to waste. She would have wanted me to share it with someone, enjoy it, let it be what it was meant to be." He looked at Sarah. "I'd like to share it with you." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "I'd be honored." They prepared the tea with ceremony, heating water to the right temperature, steeping it for exactly the right amount of time. When they finally sat across from each other, cups in hand, the aroma filled the cabin, fragrant, complex, promising warmth. "To Catherine," Sarah said softly, raising her cup. "To Catherine," Eli agreed, "and to new beginnings." They drank in silence for a while. The tea was everything Eli had hoped. Smooth, rich, worth the wait. Sarah closed her eyes, savoring it. "Tell me about your dreams," Eli said suddenly, "before everything went wrong. What did you want your life to be?" Sarah opened her eyes, considering. "I wanted a home, a real one, not just a building. I wanted to wake up in the morning and feel like I belonged somewhere. I wanted—" She paused, searching for the right words. "I wanted to matter to someone, to be more than just a burden or an obligation. You're not a burden, Sarah. I know that now. Here, with you, I felt more valued in 3 weeks than I did in 8 years of marriage." She set down her cup. "What about you? What did you dream about?" "I wanted to make a difference. Thought teaching was the way to do that. Shape young minds, help them see the world differently." He smiled sadly. "Then I wanted a family, a house full of children's laughter, books on every surface, a wife who'd argue with me about philosophy over dinner. Catherine did that. All the time. She was the smartest person I ever met. Could outthink me on any topic and did it with such grace that I couldn't even be mad about it." His voice was warm with memory. "I miss that. Miss having someone who challenges me, makes me better." "You've made me better," Sarah said. "Stronger, more capable. You've given me tools I'll need for whatever comes next." What does come next, Sarah? There it was, the question they'd been avoiding. "I still need to find the homestead," she said. "I have to at least try. If I don't, I'll always wonder what might have been. And if I asked you to stay?" The words hung in the air between them. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. "If I asked you to stay here," Eli continued, his voice rough with emotion, "to build a life here, with me, what would you say?" "I'd say—" Sarah stopped, tears streaming down her face now. "I'd say that I've fallen in love with this place, with this life, with you." Eli stood abruptly, moving to the window. His back was to her, his shoulders tense. "Don't say that." "Why not? It's true." "Because I can't protect you. Because this life is hard and lonely and I've already lost everyone I loved. Because I'm terrified that if you stay, if we try this, it'll end the same way." He turned to face her, and she saw fear naked in his eyes. I can't bury another person I love, Sarah. I can't. Sarah rose and went to him. She took his face in her hands, making him look at her. Life doesn't come with guarantees, Eli. We both know that better than most. But we have a choice. We can hide from the possibility of pain, or we can choose to live anyway. Choose to love anyway. I don't know if I'm strong enough. You are. You've been strong enough to survive 8 years alone. You're strong enough to try again. He pulled her close then, holding her as if she might disappear. Sarah wrapped her arms around him, feeling the way he trembled, feeling her own fear and hope tangled together. I'm scared, he whispered into her hair. So am I. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the quiet cabin while spring advanced outside and the future waited, uncertain and terrifying and full of possibility. Finally, Eli pulled back just enough to look at her. The homestead, we should still go look for it. Together. If it's there, if it's viable, maybe we could build something there. Start fresh. Together, Sarah agreed. But Sarah, he touched her face gently. Whatever we find out there, whatever happens, you need to know something. This cabin, this place, it's not just mine anymore. It's yours too. You have a home here, always, no matter what. Sarah kissed him then, a gentle press of lips that held all the things they hadn't said, all the promises they were too scared to make. When they pulled apart, both were smiling through tears. We're quite the pair, Sarah said, echoing Eli's words from weeks before. Yes, Eli agreed. We are. Outside, the last of the snow melted away, and the world turned green with hope. They spent the next week preparing for the journey to find Sarah's homestead. Eli repaired the pack saddle, checked and rechecked their supplies, made sure they had enough ammunition and medical supplies for any contingency. Sarah watched him work, seeing the military precision in his preparations, the careful attention to detail. You do this like you've done it before, she observed one afternoon. Planned expeditions into dangerous territory. Eli paused in his work. I've done my share of traveling in rough country, but not as a school teacher. He didn't answer, just continued checking the knots on the pack. Sarah had been noticing things. The way Eli moved, balanced, aware, as if some part of him was always assessing threats. The way he positioned himself in a room, always with his back to a wall, always with clear sight lines to the door. The scars on his body that she'd glimpsed when he changed shirts. Not the kind you got from accidents, but from deliberate violence. That evening, while Eli was outside tending the horse, Sarah made a decision. She'd been respecting his privacy, not searching through his things, but something nagged at her. If they were truly going to build a life together, she needed to know who she was building it with. She found the chest under the bed, a solid wooden box with a simple lock. The key hung on a nail behind a stack of books, not hidden exactly, but out of casual sight. Sarah took it, her hands shaking slightly, and opened the chest. Inside, carefully wrapped in oilcloth, she found a gun belt with a holster that showed years of use. Beneath that, a leather folder containing papers, and on top of everything, a poster, yellowed with age, corners torn, but still readable. The man in the sketch was younger, clean-shaven, but unmistakably Eli. Above the drawing, bold letters proclaimed, Marshal Elijah Thorne, U.S. Marshal Service. Below that, in smaller print, presumed dead in the line of duty, 1868. Credited with dismantling the Crawford gang, survived by none. Sarah's hands trembled as she unfolded the poster completely. There was more. A list of the gang members Eli had brought to justice, a mention of extraordinary valor under fire, a note about a widow and unborn child. She heard the cabin door open and quickly tried to fold the poster, but it was too late. Eli stood in the doorway, frozen, his eyes locked on what she held. Sarah, you were a marshal. Her voice came out flat, shocked. Not a school teacher, a U.S. Marshal. Eli closed the door slowly and leaned against it. I was both. I taught school for 5 years before I joined the Marshal Service. Catherine wanted me to stay teaching, but he gestured helplessly. I thought I could do more good bringing criminals to justice. You hunted the Crawford gang. Yes. And they killed Catherine. Eli flinched as if struck. Yes. Sarah set the poster down carefully on the table. Tell me everything. The truth this time. Eli moved to the hearth, staring into the flames. When he finally spoke, his voice was distant, as if he were recounting someone else's story. James Crawford ran the most violent gang in the territory. Robbery, murder, didn't matter. If there was money in it, they'd do it. I spent 2 years tracking them. Finally caught James and 3 of his men in a town called Redemption. There was a gunfight. I killed James. The others were hanged. He paused, his jaw tight. But James had a younger brother, Marcus. He wasn't with them that day. When he found out what happened, he swore revenge. Started hunting me the way I'd hunted his brother. Eli's hands clenched into fists. I'd taken precautions, moved Catherine to a safe house in Denver, had deputies watching her, but Marcus was patient. He waited until she was alone, until the deputy stepped away for just a moment. That's when he struck. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. Oh, Eli. I found her. Found them both. His voice cracked. Marcus left a message. Said this was just the beginning. Said he'd take everything from me the way I'd taken everything from him, so I hunted him, killed 2 of his men. But before I could get to Marcus himself, the Marshal Service pulled me back. Said I was too compromised, too vengeful. They were right, but I didn't care. He turned to face Sarah, and she saw the anguish in his eyes. So I faked my death, staged it to look like I died tracking Marcus into the mountains. Let everyone believe it. The service, my family back east, everyone. Then I came here, built this cabin, hid. I told myself I was protecting others, that if Marcus thought I was dead, he'd stop hunting. But the truth is, I was running. I was a coward. You're not a coward, Sarah said firmly. I've been hiding for 8 years while Marcus Crawford has been free, probably hurting other people, and I've done nothing. Sarah moved to him, forcing him to look at her. You survived. That's not nothing. You built a life here. You saved me. And now I've put you in danger too. Eli's voice was bitter. Because Marcus is still out there, and if he ever finds out I'm alive... Wait. Sarah's blood ran cold. Is that why the town turned me away? Marcus Crawford? Eli nodded slowly. I saw his men in Timber Ridge 2 weeks before you arrived. They've been in the area, asking questions, shaking down homesteaders. The town's scared. They probably thought you were connected somehow, or that helping you would draw attention. Sarah's mind raced. Those riders we saw from the cabin, Crawford's men. I recognized one of them, a man named Sutter. He rode with Marcus back in the day. Eli grabbed her shoulders. Sarah, if they know I'm alive, if they've been watching the cabin, they'll know about me. The implications crashed over them both. Sarah wasn't just a woman looking for a homestead anymore. She was connected to Eli, which meant she was a target. A way to hurt him. We need to leave, Eli said, already moving toward the chest. Tonight, head into the mountains where they can't track us easily. Or we stand and fight. Eli stopped. What? You heard me. You've been running for 8 years. Maybe it's time to stop. Sarah's voice was steady despite her fear. You said Marcus has been hurting people. How many more will he hurt while you hide? How many more lives will he destroy? Sarah, you don't understand what you're asking. This isn't some romantic notion of justice. This is survival against a man who's spent 8 years nursing his hatred. Then teach me. You trained as a marshal. You know tactics, strategy. You know how to fight. She met his eyes. I'm not asking you to do this alone. I'm asking you to let me stand with you. Eli stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. You'd risk your life for this? For me? I'd risk my life for us. For the chance to build something real, something we don't have to hide. And for all those people Marcus Crawford is still terrorizing. Sarah took his hand. You gave me shelter when no one else would. You gave me hope. Now let me give you something. A reason to stop running. A reason to fight. For a long moment, Eli said nothing. Then he reached into the chest and pulled out the gun belt. The leather was old but well maintained, the metal still gleaming. He looked at it, then at Sarah. If we do this, he said quietly, there's no going back. We'll be committed, and it might end badly. Everything might end badly, but at least we'll face it together. Eli strapped on the gun belt, and Sarah watched his entire demeanor change. The gentle mountain man receded, and something harder, more dangerous emerged. This was Marshal Elijah Thorne, the man who'd taken down the Crawford gang. He reached back into the chest and pulled out a tarnished silver badge. He looked at it for a long moment, then pinned it to his shirt. Then we do this right, he said. We gather intelligence, we prepare, and when the time comes, we end this. Once and for all. Sarah nodded. Where do we start? We start, Eli said, his voice hard with resolve, by finding out exactly what Marcus Crawford is doing in Timber Ridge, and then we make him wish I'd stayed dead. Outside, the spring night was peaceful, birds settling into their roosts, the world calm and serene. But inside the cabin, two people prepared for war. The next 3 days transformed Eli completely. The gentleman who taught Sarah to track deer and read the sky gave way to someone Sarah barely recognized. Focused, tactical, dangerous. But it wasn't a bad transformation. It was like watching someone step back into a skin they'd shed years ago, one that fit better than they'd wanted to admit. He started by teaching her properly how to handle weapons, not the careful, patient lessons of before, but intense training that assumed the worst. Out here, you get one chance, Eli said, positioning her with the rifle. Maybe two if you're lucky. Hesitate and you're dead. Miss and you're dead, understand? Sarah nodded, her hands steady on the weapon. She'd thought she understood before, but this was different. This was preparing for men who wanted to hurt them, not animals who were simply trying to survive. They practiced from dawn until dusk, shooting, reloading, moving while shooting. Eli taught her how to use cover, how to anticipate an attacker's movements, how to stay calm when fear wanted to take over. He taught her where to aim if she truly needed to stop someone, not to wound, not to warn, but to end the threat. I know this seems harsh, Eli said one evening as they cleaned the weapons, but sentiment gets you killed. If Marcus's men come, they won't hesitate. They won't show mercy. You can't either. I understand, and she did, though the weight of it settled heavy in her chest. But it wasn't just combat training. Eli also taught her tactics, how to read terrain, how to set traps, how to think like someone hunting you so you could stay one step ahead. He drew maps in the dirt, showed her approaches to the cabin, weak points and strong points. We have advantages, he explained. We know this ground, we can prepare it. And they think I'm either dead or soft from years of hiding. They'll underestimate us. Will it be enough? Eli looked at her seriously. I don't know, but it's what we've got. On the third day, Eli made a decision. I need to go into Timber Ridge, talk to some people, find out exactly what Crawford's operation looks like. I'm coming with you. Sarah, we're in this together, remember? Besides, they've already seen me. If you suddenly show up without me, that'll raise questions. Eli considered, then nodded. You're right, but we need a story, something that explains why you're still with me. They worked out the details as they rode down the mountain. Sarah would be Eli's sister-in-law, Catherine's younger sister, who'd come west after her husband died. It wasn't far from the truth, which would make it easier to maintain. They'd come to town for supplies and to inquire about land patents, perfectly normal business that wouldn't draw attention. Timber Ridge looked different in the spring sunshine. Less hostile, more weary. The people who watched them ride in weren't suspicious so much as frightened. Sarah saw it in the way they glanced at the saloon, in the way they hurried about their business without meeting anyone's eyes. Eli led them to the mercantile, the one place he'd had semi-regular dealings. The owner, a gray-haired man named Morrison, looked up as they entered. His eyes widened slightly when he recognized Eli, then Sarah. "Thorne?" he said neutrally. "And miss, thought you'd left the territory." "My sister-in-law needed help settling her late husband's affairs," Eli said easily. "Figured I'd bring her by, see if you had any news about land patents in the Northeast Territories." Morrison's eyes darted to the window, then back. "Not much news worth sharing. You folks need supplies." While Eli discussed what they needed, Sarah wandered the store, noting the layout, the other customers. 3 men at the back, playing cards and drinking, eyes that tracked her movement. Crawford's men had to be. She kept her expression neutral, interested in the merchandise, but not too interested in them. She heard fragments of their conversation, carefully catalogued each detail. They were talking about the boss coming through in a few days, about finally getting that northern route secure, about teaching homesteaders their place. When they left the mercantile, supplies packed on the horse, Sarah relayed what she'd heard. "Northern route," Eli mused. "That's your homestead area. He's been expanding his control, probably running guns or whiskey, using the remoteness as cover. So the homestead is probably right in the middle of his operation." Eli's expression was grim, which means finding it might give us leverage. As they prepared to leave town, a woman approached, older, stern-faced. Mrs. Hadley, the boarding house owner who'd turned Sarah away. "Miss," she said quietly, urgent, "I need to speak with you. Alone." Eli tensed, but Sarah touched his arm. "It's all right." Mrs. Hadley pulled Sarah into the narrow space between buildings. "I'm sorry about before, about turning you away. But you need to understand. Those men, Crawford's men, they've got this town under their thumb. They threatened to burn out anyone who helped strangers. We've got children here, families. We couldn't risk it." "I understand," Sarah said, and meant it. "But you need to leave. You and Thorne, they're talking about making examples. They know he was a marshal once, and they know you're with him now. Marcus Crawford himself is coming. 3 days, maybe 4. And when he gets here—" Mrs. Hadley's voice cracked. "Please, just go." Sarah thanked her and returned to Eli. As they rode out of town, she told him what Mrs. Hadley had said. 3 to 4 days. Eli's voice was thoughtful. "That's not much time." "Time for what?" "To prepare, to choose our ground." He looked at her. "We can't run, Sarah. Even if we wanted to, he'd track us, and he'd keep terrorizing this territory. But if we can draw him out, face him on our terms, we could end this. Maybe. Or we could die trying." Sarah considered their options as they rode back up the mountain. Running meant a lifetime of looking over their shoulders. Staying meant facing almost certain violence. But at least if they stayed, if they fought, they'd be choosing their fate. "Then we prepare," she said. "We make the cabin defensible. We set traps. We do everything you know how to do from your martial days, and we wait for him to come to us." Back at the cabin, Eli became a different person again, not the gentle mountain man, not even the careful tactician, but something else entirely, a warrior preparing a battlefield. He walked the perimeter of the cabin, making notes. He identified approach routes, choke points, areas where attackers would be vulnerable. Then he began the work of transforming his peaceful home into a fortress. They dug rifle pits at strategic points, camouflaged with brush. They strung tripwires in the woods, connected to bells that would give warning. They moved supplies, ammunition, water, food, to positions throughout the cabin where they could be accessed, even under fire. Eli showed Sarah how to barricade the door, how to create firing positions at the windows. "If they come at night," Eli explained, "they'll expect us to be asleep, vulnerable. So we'll take turns on watch. If they come during the day, they'll try to draw us out. We stay inside, make them come to us." One evening, as the sun set and they paused in their preparations, Sarah found Eli standing at the cradle. He'd moved it from the corner to a shelf, dusted it, restored it to a place of honor. "I've been carrying guilt for 8 years," he said quietly. "Guilt over Catherine, over Emma, over failing to protect them. But I realize now that guilt was keeping me from living, from healing, from being who I needed to be." He turned to Sarah, and she saw peace in his eyes. Not the peace of someone who'd given up, but the peace of someone who'd made a choice. "Whatever happens," he said, "I want you to know something. These weeks with you, preparing for this, facing this together, they've given me back something I thought I'd lost forever. Purpose. Hope. A reason to fight that isn't just revenge." Sarah went to him, took his hands. "I love you, Eli. No matter what happens, I need you to know that." "I love you too." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple band, a ring fashioned from a silver coin, hammered smooth and polished. "I made this. It's not much, but if we survive this, if we make it through, marry me, Sarah. Build a life with me." Sarah took the ring with trembling fingers. Yes, of course I will." He slipped it onto her finger, and she felt the weight of it, not heavy, but present. A promise. A future, if they could claim it. That night they held each other close, knowing that in a few days everything would change. They talked about the life they'd build if they survived. Maybe not at the cabin, maybe not at the homestead, but somewhere. Together. They talked about children, about growing old, about all the ordinary, precious things they'd once taken for granted. And when dawn came, they returned to their preparations with renewed purpose. On the morning of the 4th day, Eli finished the last trap, a deadfall positioned on the main approach route. As he armed it, he looked back at the cabin, at Sarah standing on the porch with a rifle in her hands and determination in her eyes. "They'll come today or tomorrow," he said. "I can feel it." Sarah nodded. "Then we're ready." Eli pulled out his badge, tarnished but still bearing the words U.S. Marshal, and pinned it to his shirt. It was a declaration, a challenge, a line in the sand. "Let them come," he said, and they waited. "You've got a choice, Thorne," Crawford shouted. "You come out, face me like a man, and I let the woman ride away. My quarrel's with you, not her." "Don't believe him," Sarah whispered. "I don't," Eli replied. Then, louder, "How do I know you'll keep your word?" Crawford's laugh was harsh. "You don't, but what choice do you have? You can't hold out forever. Sooner or later, we'll burn you out, and then she dies screaming. Your choice, die quick and clean, or watch her suffer first." Eli closed his eyes briefly. Sarah saw the calculation happening behind them. Marshall's thinking, weighing odds and outcomes. She knew what he was considering. "No," she said firmly. "We do this together, or not at all." "Sarah, no." She gripped his arm. "You're not sacrificing yourself. That's not how this ends." Eli looked at her, and something passed between them, understanding, love, acceptance. They would stand together, whatever came. "I've got a counter-offer," Eli called out. "You leave now, take your men, and I don't hunt you down like I did your brother." Big words from a dead man. Crawford's voice shifted, moving position. He was circling, trying to find a weak point. Eli tracked the movement, then made a decision. He reached to the shelf and carefully lifted down the carved wooden horse, the toy he'd made years ago for Emma. He set it gently on the table, a reminder of what was at stake, of why he couldn't fail again. Then he turned to Sarah with absolute focus. "Listen carefully. I'm going to draw them out. When I give the signal, 3 shots rapid, you cover the east approach. Don't hesitate. Don't think. Just shoot." "What are you going to do?" "Something stupid." He kissed her quickly. "Trust me." Before Sarah could protest, Eli moved to the door. He took a breath, then opened it and stepped out onto the porch, hands raised but gun belt still strapped on. "Crawford," he shouted. "You want me? Here I am." Sarah's heart stopped. She moved to the window, rifle ready, trying to see what Eli was planning. Crawford emerged from the trees, flanked by Sutter and 2 others. 4 against 1, with more likely hidden. Crawford was older than Eli, maybe 50, with graying hair and eyes that held too much hatred. "Finally," Crawford said. "The mighty Marshal Thorne. You look older, softer. 8 years of hiding will do that to a man." 8 years of healing, Eli corrected. Of finding reasons to live instead of reasons to kill. But you wouldn't understand that. Crawford's face twisted. "My brother was all I had. You took him from me. Your brother killed innocent people. He chose his path. And you chose yours." Crawford's hand moved toward his gun. "Let's see if you're still fast." What happened next took seconds but felt like hours. Crawford drew. Eli's hand blurred to his weapon. 2 shots rang out simultaneously. Crawford staggered back, blood blooming on his shoulder. Eli stood untouched, smoke curling from his barrel, but then Sutter and the others opened fire. Eli dove off the porch, rolling behind the water trough as bullets chewed up the wood. He fired 3 times rapid. The signal. Sarah didn't hesitate. A man broke from the east tree line, trying to flank. She fired, and he went down. Another appeared, and another shot. Her hands were steady, her mind clear, everything Eli had taught her focusing into this moment. From behind the trough, Eli was picking off Crawford's men with precise shots, his martial training evident in every movement, economy of motion, efficiency of purpose. These weren't the actions of a soft hermit. This was a professional at work. Crawford, bleeding but not beaten, fired at Eli. The bullet ricocheted off the trough. "You think you've won? You think killing me solves anything?" "I don't want to kill you," Eli shouted back. "I want you to stop, to end this cycle." "Never." Crawford lunged forward, firing wildly. Eli had no choice. His next shot took Crawford in the chest. The older man fell hard, gun dropping from his hand. Sutter and the remaining man saw their boss fall. They looked at each other, then at Eli, calculating odds that were no longer in their favor. Slowly, they raised their hands. "Smart choice," Eli said, not lowering his weapon. "Drop the guns. Kick them away." They complied. Sutter's face was bitter. "The Marshal Service won't thank you for this. You're still dead to them." "Don't need their thanks. Just need this to be over." Sarah emerged from the cabin, rifle ready. Together, they kept the men covered while Eli checked Crawford. The old outlaw was still breathing, but barely. "Why?" Crawford whispered, blood on his lips. "Why couldn't you just stay dead?" "Because," Eli said quietly, "someone needed me, and I needed to stop being afraid of living." Crawford's eyes closed. His breathing stopped. The silence that followed was profound. After months of tension, years of running, it was finally over. 6 weeks later, Sarah stood on the porch of the cabin, watching the sun set over the mountains. The spring had fully given way to early summer, and the world was green and alive. Birds sang in the trees. A warm breeze carried the scent of wildflowers. Behind her, she heard Eli moving inside, the familiar sounds of him preparing dinner. The cabin felt different now. Lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted from its walls. The cradle sat in the corner, no longer covered, no longer a monument to grief, but a promise of possibility. After the confrontation, they'd ridden to the nearest town with a law office, bringing Sutter and the other surviving member of Crawford's gang as prisoners. The local marshal had been skeptical at first, a supposedly dead U.S. marshal returning from the grave, but Eli's badge and the evidence of Crawford's crimes spoke for themselves. There had been paperwork, statements, official recognition of Eli's service and his reasons for disappearing. The marshal's service had been gracious, understanding even. They'd offered to reinstate him, but Eli had declined. That life, he'd told them, was behind him now. Timber Ridge had welcomed them back differently the second time. Mrs. Hadley had actually smiled, pressed Sarah's hand, thanked them for freeing the town from Crawford's shadow. Morrison at the Mercantile had offered them credit, insisted on it. The town was finding its footing again, its fear replaced by cautious hope. But Eli and Sarah had decided not to stay in Timber Ridge. They'd found Sarah's homestead, or what was left of it. The land was good, with a stream and meadow protected by hills. The original cabin had collapsed years ago, but the foundation was solid. "It'll take work," Eli had said, surveying the site. "A lot of work, but we could build something good here." "Together," Sarah had agreed. They'd spent the last weeks clearing the land, planning the new cabin, living between the homestead and Eli's mountain cabin while they worked. It was hard labor, but satisfying in a way Sarah had never experienced. Every log they placed, every nail they drove, was building their future. The door opened behind her, and Eli stepped out, 2 cups of tea in his hands. The special Ceylon tea they'd shared weeks ago was long gone, but this was good too. Mint from the wild plants growing near the stream. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, handing her a cup. "Just thinking about how far we've come. A few months ago, I was standing on a frozen street, certain I was going to die. Now," she gestured at the mountains, the sky, the life they were building. "Now I have more than I ever dreamed possible. We both do." Eli wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "Though I think we should set a date. For the wedding. I thought we'd wait until the new cabin is finished. I'm tired of waiting. We've both waited long enough." He turned her to face him. "Marry me next week. We'll have a simple ceremony, just us and whoever wants to come from town. We'll say our vows right here, on this porch, with the mountains as witnesses." Sarah smiled, feeling tears prick her eyes. Happy tears this time. Next week, then. The traveling preacher came the following Sunday along with half of Timber Ridge. Mrs. Hadley brought a cake. Morrison brought his fiddle. Even some of the homesteaders from the surrounding area made the journey, grateful to the couple who'd freed them from Crawford's tyranny. Sarah wore a simple dress, but she'd woven wildflowers into her hair. Eli wore his best shirt, freshly washed, and at Sarah's insistence, his marshal's badge. Not as a symbol of his old life, but as a reminder of the courage and honor he carried. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises of shelter and trust, of partnership and love. When the preacher pronounced them married, the crowd cheered, and Eli kissed Sarah as if they were the only 2 people in the world. The celebration lasted into the evening. Morrison played his fiddle while couples danced. Food was shared, stories were told, and for the first time in years, the mountain rang with laughter. As night fell and the guests began to leave, Sarah and Eli stood together, watching the last wagon disappear down the trail. The cabin was theirs again, quiet and peaceful. "Mrs. Thorne," Eli said, testing out the name. "I like how that sounds," Sarah replied. They went inside, and Eli moved to the shelf where the cradle sat. He ran his hand over the smooth wood, his expression thoughtful. "I was thinking," he said quietly, "maybe it's time this had a purpose again. Not right away, but someday. When we're ready." Sarah came to stand beside him, her hand covering his. "Someday," she agreed, "when we're ready." She'd brought something from her old carpet bag, something she'd been working on in the quiet evenings. She showed it to Eli now, a quilt, hand-stitched from scraps of fabric, each piece telling a story. The worn shawl she'd arrived in, a piece of Eli's old shirt, fabric from the clothes they'd worked in while building. It was a patchwork of their journey, sewn together with love. "For our bed," she said, "for our home." Eli took it, running his fingers over the careful stitches. "It's beautiful. You're beautiful." They spread the quilt over their bed, and Sarah thought about all the nights ahead. Nights of warmth and safety, of shared dreams and quiet companionship. She thought about the life they would build, the challenges they would face, the joys they would share. Outside, the mountains stood eternal, indifferent to human struggles and triumphs. But inside the cabin, two people who had found each other in the darkest of circumstances lay down together, ready to face whatever came next. Sometimes the kindest thing anyone can do is open their door when the whole world has shut theirs. Eli had opened his door to Sarah when she needed it most, and in return, Sarah had opened her heart, giving Eli a reason to live again, to hope again, to love again. They had survived the storm together, and now, together, they would build something beautiful in the sunshine.